if you don't have, an assistive device to help move someone from their bed to their chair, that can really cause an issue both for residents and staff, more so than just some of the inconveniences that, you and I might experience with the power outages. There's so many things that can really have a pretty immediate consequence to a resident's health and well-being.
Hello out there. Welcome back to the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. My name is Rob. I'll be your host for this episode. We are talking about emergency preparedness in nursing homes, but specifically the ramifications of Winter Storm Uri in Texas from a few years ago. What can we learn from that? Like, what does the data tell us what we should do tomorrow? But we're certainly not having that conversation alone. We have the fantastic Brian Downer to walk us through that process. But right now it's time for the nursing home regulation question of the week and your opportunity to win the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast mug if you so desire. But let's get real. Nobody really desires that. But if you do, if you want to participate, you're going to go to our TikTok at Justice for Residents. You're going to find the question of the week video. You're going to look for the thumbnail of Rachel from Friends. Rachel from Friends. You're going to put your answer to this week's nursing home regulation question of the week, as well as your favorite decade for women's hairstyles. So to participate, answer the question and then put in your favorite decade for women's hairstyles. My favorite decade for women's hairstyles are the 1960s. You thought it was going to be the 90s because that's the last time that I had hair, but it's not true. It's 1960s. You got the beehive, you have the afro, you have, what is it called? Like it's a ponytail, but y'all lift your hair up, and then there's the ponytail. I'm trying to think about what that's called. Maybe I should have Googled that before I started this. But anyway, there's many choices in the 1960s for cool hairstyles for the ladies. Anyway, enter that in. Random winner selected on Sunday on TikTok or at schenkfirm.com/podcast/giveaway. Mug is shipped at the end of the month. Difficulty level this week, folks, I'm going to say is extremely easy. I think we're getting into a routine of easy questions. Gene is the producer. He's the one in charge, I guess, of coming up with these questions. But I say if you get this right, go to the salon today, give yourself some curls, do a perm. Under 42 CFR 483.70D3, the nursing home's governing body is directly responsible and accountable for which program? Is it A, the admissions program, B, the QAPI program, or C, the floor program? And that answer is B, the QAPI program, or the Quality Assurance Performance Improvement program. The governing body is directly responsible for making sure that the nursing home has a QAPI program. All right, enough about QAPI. It's time to get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. We're having a conversation about emergency preparedness, but we're not having that conversation alone. We have Dr. Brian Downer, PhD. Brian is an associate professor at the University of Texas Medical Branch School of Public and Population Health. He studies healthcare outcomes for older adults with a focus on dementia and nursing home care using national Medicare data. Dr. Downer earned his PhD in gerontology from the University of Kentucky and completed an NIA postdoctoral fellowship on minority aging at the UTMB Seeley Center of Aging, and we're so happy to have him on the show today. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. Really looking forward to it.
I would love just to kind of start off the show with tell us about how you came to write this paper. And when I say the paper, I'll make it in the show notes for everybody. But you wrote a terrific paper about Winter Storm Uri. Am I saying Uri correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Winter Storm Uri and nursing homes in the state of Texas. So kind of start us off with what made you want to do that.
Yeah, so it kind of came out about for a few different reasons. So a lot of my research focuses on outcomes of nursing home care. So I have an interest in this subject matter just from a a professional perspective. But then there's also kind of a personal reason for being interested in this project, and that's I live in Galveston, Texas, and have been living in the area since 2014. So my family and I, we lived through Winter Storm Uri, and got to experience, the power outages, the unusually cold weather, and so it added kind of a personal motivation for the paper as well.
So from just a 40,000 foot view, what did your paper talk about? And kind of what are your opinions about where we can go
Mhm.
from here?
Yeah, so to kind of give people a little bit of a sense about the paper, so Winter Storm Uri happened in February of 2021, and for most parts of the country, temperatures in the teens and 20s wouldn't be overly problematic, but for Texas, that's quite unusual. And as a result of some infrastructure concerns with the power grid, there was these widespread power outages that lasted for several days across the state, and so we were able to get our hands on some data that indicated whether a nursing home reported having experienced a power outage or some type of water shortage. So we had information about kind of their utilities and if they ever lost water or power during the storm. And so we were interested in whether residents of nursing homes that experienced one of these outages, if they had adverse healthcare outcomes. And we were particularly interested in hospitalizations, ER visits, mortality, and we were also able to look at physician visits, both during the week of the storm and then for about 6 weeks after the storm. And so basically what we found is that residents of nursing homes that experienced an outage, they had similar amounts of physician visits, hospitalizations and ER visits. There didn't seem to be much happening in those outcomes, but those residents did have higher mortality in the weeks after Winter Storm Uri. And so we were interested in, kind of figuring out what exactly might be, the longer term health effects of a storm such as Winter Storm Uri occurring in a place that, we wouldn't typically expect to see this type of weather event to occur.
I mean, other than the thermostat, what are some of the things that are affected when the power goes out at a nursing home?
Yeah, I mean, so this is where talking with some of my clinician colleagues was really helpful. They immediately went to any type of medical device that requires electricity, and so there's certainly the obvious kind of life-sustaining types of things, but even something like an electrical powered like bed or a mobility device, things that from a day-to-day standpoint, if you don't have an assistive device to help move someone from their bed to their chair, that can really cause an issue both for residents and staff. So it's more so than just some of the inconveniences that you and I might experience with the power outages. There's certainly things that can really have a pretty immediate consequence to a resident's health and well-being.
Well, Brian, can you this is what I'm kind of having trouble wrapping my head around is like in my mind, you have a terribly powerful winter storm. It comes down, lights go out, power goes out. But and in my mind, it would be the implications would be immediate. But from what I hear you describe, it that you looked at mortality rates for months later and they were higher. So like I'm trying to understand how we get from A to B and why there's that length of that duration of time.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that surprised us actually with this paper is given that the winter storm, it was a very like acute shock to the system. And even if you look at some of the power outage data, you see these really abrupt effects for a couple of days, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is when things were really bad. But then by Saturday, the temperatures have returned to normal, power was back on, people were kind of back to their kind of daily routines. And so we were expecting to see these very kind of immediate consequences, especially around things like ER visits, hospitalizations. We did see abrupt changes in physician visits, but we were a bit surprised by, not seeing longer lasting effects around mortality. We weren't able to quite dig into this much in this particular analysis, but it could be, consequences from, missed physician visits or, disruptions to kind of daily care that then don't kind of manifest into the outcome until maybe a few weeks later. This is what was for me interesting about this project is that there's been a lot of research done on the consequences of like hurricanes, where there you do see pretty consistently these longer term lasting effects. But for a hurricane, it could take weeks to recover from that storm. So you could have pretty long disruptions to kind of regular care that we weren't detecting with the Winter Storm Uri. We saw a big dip in physician visits that immediately recovered back to kind of pre-storm levels in the weeks after. So I don't have a real great answer, I guess, to your question, but it is a little bit unclear as to why we didn't see these mortality differences until a few weeks after the storm had passed.
Were you able to draw any conclusions other than you have a higher mortality rate for the places that the power went out? Like any other conclusions that you can draw?
So that's part of the area of some of the future work that we're interested in doing. One is looking at some of these maybe causal mechanisms that might explain why residents of nursing homes that experience these disruptions were at higher mortality. We're also interested in how maybe certain facilities may have been more affected than others. Looking into things like staffing levels, maybe overall quality measures, things that might indicate whether there were certain nursing homes that were more adversely affected to the storm. I think looking more closely into things around, we could use like the MDS, for example, to look at maybe the type of care that people were receiving during the week of the storm and see if we can maybe link disruptions into daily care and see if that was part of what was causing this increased mortality. Things that we can also look into, and we have discussed looking into this, might be among certain resident populations, people with dementia, for example, who might be especially vulnerable to disruptions to daily care, or people with other, kind of highly comorbid types of conditions who might be, at the greatest risk for mortality.
Are you privy to any data with respect to how the people were passing? Like, was there a particular pathology that stuck out from the statistics?
So it's interesting. So there's, and I would encourage people if they're not already aware of this, but there was a really great Senate report called Left in the Dark that really goes into a lot of detail and some of these contextual things that, the data that we have don't allow for. But they're interviewing, nursing home administrators and really talking about, what was it specifically about the storm that was so devastating to older adults. One of the things that we can do through some other data sets is look at cause of death. I think what's challenging is we have maybe mortality that's directly attributable to the storm versus things that are maybe further downstream from the storm that's more of a consequence from disruptions to like daily care, for example. So there is data available to where we could look at and incorporate information around specific causes of death, and then try and attribute that specific instance of a person's death and attributing it directly back to the storm.
I see that. I'll have that in the show notes. Left in the Dark: The Impact of the 2021 Texas Blackout on Long-Term Care, and that's the United States Senate. Like I said, Senator. What senator was that?
I can't recall
Casey.
who the senator was. It's
Senator Casey.
It's a wonderful report, and actually, they were how we were able to get the information about whether nursing homes experience some type of disruption. So it's a really fascinating read. It really puts into perspective how challenging that week was for residents and staff.
This is the storm where it was Senator Cruz was going to Mexico. This is that storm, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
yes, that's the one for sure.
All right. So it was there anything in the data that could tell you, because you mentioned like, hey, maybe in the future we can look to see like from, a mechanical standpoint, like why the power went off in one places or the other. Like, is there anything that you could that you can come to a conclusion on with respect to like the nursing homes on this grid or the nursing homes that have, I don't know, backup power generators or whatever? Like there's something that could be done in that regard.
So in this specific project, we didn't have that data available to us, but that's where I've been looking into. So there is, and I've been able to get access to it. There is like publicly available data about like so we know where the nursing homes are located, obviously, and then we can through those kind of geocoding the longitude and latitude, like we can place the nursing homes and kind of piece together where they are in relation to these different like power grids. So like using where I am, for example, with that University of Texas medical branch, like that power grid is much different from a stability standpoint than just your regular kind of residential power grid. And so there's a nursing home in Galveston that's relatively close to UTMB, and it's probably on a different power grid than the other nursing home that's a bit further down the island. So it's a really big kind of lift in terms of the data required. But you could kind of piece together, I think, where nursing homes are located and what their power grid supply is. This is getting a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because in Texas, like that was kind of one of the big things is that you don't have like a standard grid. Like it's like who knows, right? It's the Wild Wild West.
And that's exactly what I was gonna get into is, that really brought to the public's attention just the unique intricacies of the Texas power grid. And at least for me, I don't think many people really realize that Texas doesn't draw on emergency energy supply from other states. And that's what made it, because Louisiana and these other kind of bordering states, like they were also experiencing the same winter storm. It wasn't just Texas that was where this was occurring. And so there were certainly power outages and things in these other states. But I think those states had a bit more, just resilience built into the system, and it wasn't as, emergent of an event as it was for Texas. And it really comes back to the, the vulnerabilities of the power grid of Texas that really made this a more devastating event than it maybe could have been or should have been.
I'm sure that there are advantages. I mean, that's, I guess, the good thing of living in a federal republic. There are advantages to running your experiment the way you do in Texas. But again, you have, as you mentioned, you have to weigh the advantages of being independent versus, when you really need a helping hand, being able to at least stretch your hand out and get it. You know what I mean? Wow. Okay. Well, is there anything that you've uncovered in your research that if you had a family that has a loved one in a nursing home in Texas, at least, kind of what advice would you give them about this situation?
Yeah, it's certainly a couple of things. I think, one is that, emergency preparedness is a year-round process. Obviously for people in Texas and even the Gulf Coast and Atlantic Coast, like we're all familiar with hurricanes. We're coming up onto the start of hurricane season here in a few months. And, summer and fall is a time where people are on guard. And now it's that even in the winter months, we need to be prepared. Houston got a couple of inches of snow earlier this year, and it brought back memories of Winter Storm Uri a bit about, is the power grid going to hold? So if you do have a family member who, is a resident of a nursing home, I would talk to the nursing home about what their emergency plans are and, how quickly can they implement those plans. And I think now it's, thinking about disasters that maybe we wouldn't typically expect, for our area. I will say that information about a nursing home's disaster preparedness and how well they've performed, that type of information is publicly available. It can be difficult to find. You really have to dig for it. But as part of the state inspections, nursing homes will have to provide information about their evacuation plan. Do they have a backup power supply? Do they have another nursing home that they could send residents to in the case of an evacuation? So that information is available. And if you have a family member who's in a nursing home, I would recommend people maybe try and talk with the nursing home just to kind of find out what types of plans are in place. And that way, if there are, considerations that need to be made, specific things about your family member in terms of medications or other kind of health related needs, you can make sure that the nursing home is able to help meet those. So finding out about nursing homes, kind of emergency preparedness plans, I think can really go a long way in helping keep residents safe.
Very well said. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge with us and all the good work that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed it.
Well, folks, I hope you found this episode educational. If you have an idea for a topic you would like for me to discuss, please let me know. If you have an idea for a person that you'd like for me to talk to, please let me know that as well. Also, be sure to enter to win the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast mug. Make sure you let us know which decade of ladies' hairstyles that you like. Again, 1960s is the correct answer, but you can put whatever you want. Could be the 80s. That was the Aquanet decade, I think. I could be wrong. I'm speaking out of place. This is coming from a man with no hair. So, go figure. Anyway, good mansplaining. So, new episodes of the podcast come out every single Monday. And with that, folks, I'm going to get out of here. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. Nothing said on this podcast, either by the host or the guest, should be construed as legal or medical advice, nor is intended to create an attorney-client relationship between the host or their guest and the listener. New episodes, for now, are available every other Monday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on your favorite podcast app, as well as on YouTube and our website, nursinghomeabusepodcast.com. Again, that's nursinghomeabusepodcast.com. See you next time.